0500 hours, post-battle box. The sun breaches the eastern horizon. It does not bring warmth, it brings visibility. The gray light reveals the true scale of the night's butchery. The ocean surface is no longer blue. It is a slick black sheet of heavy fuel oil that stretches for miles. Smoke columns rise from the water like funeral pyres, marking the locations of sunken vessels. The air tastes of copper, salt, and burnt plastic. A solitary rescue helicopter hovers low over the debris field. The rotor wash pushes empty life jackets and floating seat cushions aside. A rescue swimmer drops from the winch, splashing into the oily muck. He swims toward a piece of jagged hull plating. A sailor clings to it, his flight suit scorched and torn. The swimmer harnesses the survivor. The cable pulls them up, dripping black sludge back into the sea. On the carrier, the flight deck is a ruin. A bulldozer pushes the twisted, burnt skeleton of a fighter jet toward the edge. The metal shrieks as it scrapes across the non-skid surface. It tumbles over the side, splashing heavily into the water below. Damage control teams lie collapsed on the steel, their silver suits stained with soot and foam. They do not move. They stare at the empty horizon. The admiral stands on the bridge wing of the surviving destroyer. He lifts his binoculars. The enemy fleet is broken. Burning hulks dot the distance, settling lower into the water. But his own formation is shattered. 2 frigates are gone. The carrier is crippled. "Signal all vessels," he says, his voice raspy. "Set course 090, best possible speed, we are leaving." The remnants of the task force turn slowly. The propellers churn the thick, oily water. The ships limp away from the engagement zone, leaving a wide wake through the destruction. Behind them, fins break the surface of the oil. The sharks begin to circle the debris. 0515 hours, deep inside the contested strait. The thick fog begins to thin, torn apart by the strengthening morning wind. The sharp metallic smell of burnt explosive powder hangs heavy over the wet deck of the U.S. destroyer. Sailors stand rigid at their battle stations, chests heaving, eyes scanning the gray horizon through sights and binoculars. The ship moves slowly, jagged debris from the previous engagement bumping rhythmically against the steel hull. A deceptive, heavy calm returns to the water, broken only by the hum of the ship's turbines. A solid radar contact blooms on the glowing green screen. It is larger and heavier than the previous boats. Through the lifting mist, the gray silhouette of an armed hostile patrol boat emerges. It cuts aggressively across the destroyer's path, blocking the navigation lane. Its forward turret rotates with a mechanical jerk. The barrel lowers, aiming directly at the American bridge. A bright muzzle flash lights up the enemy deck. A heavy caliber shell screams across the water. It strikes the destroyer's forward deck railing with the force of a sledgehammer. Metal shears and twists. Sparks shower the gray paint. The sound of the impact rings like a struck bell throughout the ship, vibrating through the soles of the crew's boots. "We are engaged," the captain yells, pointing at the hostile vessel. "Main battery, take them out." The massive turret on the destroyer's bow swivels instantly. The hydraulic whine is audible even over the wind. The gun stabilizes and locks. It fires. The entire ship shudders violently as the recoil absorbs the shot. A massive shell exits the barrel at supersonic speed, pushing a shockwave of condensed air across the water. The round slams into the dead center of the hostile patrol boat. The impact is absolute. The steel hull buckles and rips open like wet cardboard. The explosion cores the ship from the inside out. The enemy bridge disintegrates into a cloud of glass and twisted steel. The radar mast topples forward, crushing the crew on the deck below. Fire consumes the midsection of the vessel instantly. Ammunition stored below the enemy deck cooks off. A massive secondary explosion tears the vessel in two. The bow flies upward, severing completely from the stern. Debris, jagged metal shards, burning life preservers, pieces of railing, rains down into the ocean. The concussion wave hits the American ship, rattling the heavy glass windows of the bridge. The hostile vessel vanishes beneath the surface in seconds. A swirling vortex of black oil and white foam marks its grave. The destroyer pushes forward, its engines ramping up. The steel bow crashes through the floating wreckage, pushing the burning debris aside as the fleet continues its advance. 0600 hours, 10,000 feet above the carrier strike group. The sun crests the horizon, painting the tops of the heavy cumulus clouds in brilliant orange and gold. On the flight deck of the carrier below, steam rises from the catapult tracks, drifting across the steel runway. Flight deck crews in colored jerseys crouch near the wheels of parked aircraft, checking hydraulic lines and weapons hardpoints. The roar of jet engines turning over creates a deafening, steady vibration that shakes the bones of everyone on deck. The air smells of high-octane aviation fuel and sea salt. A piercing alarm cuts through the flight deck comms. The ship's main air search radar paints two fast-moving contacts, dropping from the cloud layer directly overhead. They are hostile fighter jets, diving in a steep attack profile to avenge their fallen patrol boat. They break the sound barrier. A double sonic boom cracks like a thunderclap, shaking the water off the wings of the parked planes. "Launch! Launch! Launch!" the air boss screams over the radio. The pilot in the lead U.S. fighter jet slams the throttle forward to full afterburner. Blue flame shoots 40 feet out the back of the exhaust nozzles. The steam catapult fires. The jet is hurled forward, accelerating from 0 to 160 miles per hour in 2 seconds. The pilot is crushed back into his seat by the G-force. The landing gear leaves the deck, and the jet screams upward, climbing almost vertically to meet the threat. The two enemy jets level off and bank hard, their wingtips cutting through the moist air, leaving vapor trails. The U.S. pilot spots the glint of sun on metal. He hauls the stick back. The U.S. fighter jet pulls a punishing high G-turn, forcing the airframe to groan under the stress. The pilot struggles to breathe against the pressure suit as his vision narrows. He slots in behind the trailing enemy bandit. The enemy pilot deploys flares. Bright magnesium balls burn white-hot, dropping like fireworks to confuse the sensors. The U.S. pilot ignores them. He waits for the solid tone. The lock indicator turns red. He depresses the launch button on the stick. A short-range air-to-air missile ignites. It tears off the rail with a whoosh, trailing white smoke. It snakes through the air, adjusting its fins violently to match the enemy's desperate turn. The missile impacts the enemy jet's right engine. The explosion rips the tail section completely off the aircraft. Titanium shreds like paper. The fuselage enters a violent flat spin, engulfed in a ball of orange fire. The canopy blows off as the enemy pilot ejects, tumbling into the air just seconds before the main wreckage slams into the ocean surface. A massive column of water geysers upward. The second enemy fighter sees the destruction. The pilot panics, rolls inverted, and dives toward the safety of the coastline, fleeing the engagement area. The U.S. fighter jet banks smoothly, patrolling the airspace over the burning slick where the enemy plane went down. 0645 hours, center of the convoy formation. The fleet moves at a steady 12 knots, churning the gray water into long white streaks. The heavy supply ship plows through the swells, its steel hull groaning under the massive weight of fuel and munitions. Below the waterline, the ocean is a vast pressurized darkness. Sunlight barely penetrates the murky depths. Sonar operators on the escort frigate listen to the rhythmic pulse of biological noise, whales clicking, shrimp snapping, shifting currents. It is a noisy, chaotic acoustic environment that hides everything. The sonar operator freezes. He presses the headphones tighter against his ears, filtering the static. A sharp metallic clank cuts through the background noise. It is not biological. It is the distinctive sound of a flooded tube door sliding open. "Transient, metallic noise bearing 210, he screams into the voice loop. "Torpedo tubes opening." Above the waves, the ASW helicopter hovering on the fleet's flank reacts instantly. The pilot banks the aircraft hard to the left, dropping the nose to gain speed. The rotor blades slap the air violently as the machine accelerates toward the contact point. The side door slides open. A crewman leans out against the harness and spots the shadow beneath the water. He kicks a smoke marker out the door. It hits the water and hisses, spewing green smoke to mark the target. The helicopter enters a low hover, kicking up a relentless spray of salt water. The pilot flips the weapon safety cover. "Weapon away," he says. A lightweight torpedo drops from the pylon. It falls 50 feet and splashes into the sea. The stabilizing parachute detaches and floats away. The torpedo's motor whines to life. It begins a spiral search pattern, its active sonar pinging loudly, a sonar hammer blow ringing through the water. Deep below, the enemy submarine hears the ping. The captain tries to flood the ballast tanks to dive deeper, but he is too slow. The American torpedo locks onto the screw noise. It accelerates, closing the distance in seconds. It impacts the submarine's aft pressure hull. The warhead detonates. The explosion crushes the submarine's thick outer steel skin like an aluminum can. The pressure hull collapses inward instantly. High-pressure water jets through the breach like a diamond cutter, slicing through pipes, wiring, and bulkheads. The submarine shudders violently as the internal atmosphere compresses and ignites. The propeller shaft snaps. The vessel tilts nose down, losing all buoyancy. It begins the long, silent slide into the abyss, carrying its crew down to the crushing dark. On the surface, a massive bubble of black oil and debris boils up near the green smoke. The water churns violently for a moment, expelling the last breath of the dying ship. Then the ocean settles. The supply ship continues its course, passing right over the grave of the hunter that almost sank it. 0730 hours, Command Information Center of the lead cruiser. The compartment is bathed in low-level blue tactical lighting. The air conditioning hums aggressively, fighting the heat generated by banks of supercomputers. Sailors sit hunched over glowing consoles, their faces reflecting the cascading streams of data. The fleet formation holds steady, maintaining a defensive perimeter 10 miles off the hostile coastline. The ocean outside is calm, but the electronic spectrum is chaotic. Invisible waves of radar energy sweep back and forth between the ships and the land. The electronic warfare officer's console flashes a violent red strobe. A piercing, digitized warble screams through the headset of every operator in the room. It is the specific, terrifying tone of a shore-based targeting radar locking onto the hull. "Vampire, vampire, inbound bearing 090, the tactical officer yells, his voice cracking over the internal comms. On the horizon, the coastline erupts. 8 trails of white smoke streak upward, leveling off instantly to hug the surface of the water. The anti-ship missiles accelerate to supersonic speeds, pushing shockwaves across the ocean surface. They close the distance at Mach 2, covering a mile every few seconds. The radar tracks them as fast-moving jagged lines converging on the American fleet. "All ships maneuver to unmask batteries, birds away," the captain barks. The vertical launch cells on the destroyer's forward deck blow open. Compressed gas ejects interceptor missiles into the air. Their rocket motors ignite with a blinding flash, sending them streaking upward to meet the threat. The sky fills with crisscrossing smoke trails. The interceptors dive on the incoming threats. 4 brilliant orange flashes illuminate the morning sky as the interceptors collide with the enemy missiles miles out. Metal rains down into the sea, but 4 enemy missiles survive the gauntlet. They drop lower, skimming just 10 feet above the wave tops to hide from radar. They weave erratically, programmed to dodge defensive fire. They target the broad side of the lead carrier. The fleet's defensive systems shift to automatic. Mortar tubes on the ship decks fire canisters of chaff. The canisters explode mid-air, creating massive blooming clouds of silver foil strips designed to confuse the missile guidance systems. 2 of the enemy missiles bite on the decoy. They veer sharply into the silver clouds and explode harmlessly, shredding the foil into glittering dust. The last 2 missiles ignore the decoys. They roar toward the carrier, closing the final mile in seconds. The phalanx automated cannons on the carrier's sponsons spin up. The 6-barreled rotary guns blur into motion. They unleash a deafening, continuous roar, a sound like canvas ripping, magnified 1,000 times. Brrrt! A solid stream of tungsten penetrator rounds spews from the barrels, creating a literal wall of heavy metal directly in the path of the missiles. The lead missile flies face first into the tungsten stream. The heavy bullets shred the nose cone and detonate the warhead instantly. A massive fireball erupts just 200 yards from the ship, the concussion wave shaking the flight deck netting. The final missile attempts to pull up. The second automated cannon tracks it. The stream of tracers saws through the missile's wing. It loses lift instantly. The weapon tumbles uncontrollably, cartwheeling across the water surface. It smashes into the hull of the support ship but fails to arm. The kinetic impact punches a massive dent in the steel plating, stripping paint and buckling the frame, before the broken missile carcass slides off into the wake. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" The automated guns spin down with a mechanical whine. The air is thick with the sulfur smell of propellant and the metallic tang of burnt ozone. Smoke from the destroyed warheads drifts over the fleet, settling on the water like a gray shroud. 900 hours, hostile radar platform Bravo, 12 miles off the coast. The rusty steel lattice rises 100 feet out of the churning green ocean like a mechanical skeleton. Salt spray coats the metal grating of the walkways. High above, the massive rectangular radar dish rotates with a heavy grinding rhythm, scanning the horizon for the American fleet. On the lower deck, 2 enemy sentries lean against the railing, their rifles slung lazily over their shoulders. The smell of diesel fumes from the platform's generator mixes with the brine of the sea. A low, rhythmic thumping sound cuts through the wind. The sentries straighten up. They squint into the sun. The noise grows rapidly into a roar. 2 black assault helicopters scream over the waves, pulling up sharply to hover directly over the platform's helipad. The lead sentry reaches for his radio. A single shot cracks from the helicopter skid. The sniper round hits the sentry in the chest plate. He is thrown backward, crashing hard against the steel railing before sliding to the deck. The second sentry raises his rifle. A burst of suppressed fire from the hovering aircraft stitches a line of holes across the bulkhead behind him. He crumples. Thick braided ropes drop from the helicopter skids. Gloved hands grab the lines. Navy SEALs slide down the fast ropes, boots hitting the metal deck with heavy thuds. They detach instantly, weapons raised. They move in a tight, fluid stack formation toward the main blast door. "Breacher up!" the team leader shouts. A SEAL slaps a strip of adhesive explosive charge onto the door hinges. The team stacks up along the wall, shielding their bodies. The charge detonates. The heavy steel door is blown inward, twisting off its frame and clattering across the floor inside. The point man tosses a flash grenade into the darkened corridor. A blinding white flash and a deafening bang erupt from the doorway. Smoke billows out. The team flows into the room. Inside, chaos reigns. Enemy technicians scramble away from their consoles, blinded and disoriented. Officer reaches for a pistol on his desk. 2 rapid shots from the SEAL's suppressed assault rifle drop him instantly. The rest of the team fans out, clearing the corners. Laser sights sweep across the smoke-filled room. "Clear left! Clear right!" The team leader moves to the main server bank. The electronics are humming, feeding targeting data to the shore batteries. He pulls a block of C4 plastic explosive from his pouch and jams it into the server rack. He sets the timer for 30 seconds. "Fire in the hole! Move! Move!" The team retreats, sprinting back out to the sunlit deck. They vault over the railing, sliding down the emergency fast ropes to the waiting extraction boats below. Behind them, the operations room detonates. The blast blows the windows out, sending a shower of glass and burning computer parts raining down into the ocean. The massive radar dish above grinds to a halt, its electronic brain fried. The platform goes dark. 1,100 hours. Command deck of the flagship destroyer. The air inside the tactical center is cold and recycled. Digital maps of the hostile coastline glow on the central table, highlighting the red zones of the enemy missile batteries. The Admiral stands over the display, his face illuminated by the harsh blue light of the screens. He watches the tracking data stabilize. He nods once to the weapons officer. "Authorize strike package Alpha, clear the coast," he says. The officer inserts a physical firing key into the console and twists it sharply. "Batteries released," the officer confirms. On the forward deck, the silence shatters. 12 steel hatches on the vertical launch system flip open in rapid succession. Compressed air hisses violently. Then ignition. The solid rocket boosters roar to life with a sound like the earth tearing open. Massive pillars of white smoke and orange flame erupt, engulfing the ship's bow. The cruise missiles streak out of the tubes, riding columns of fire into the gray sky. They climb briefly before arcing over, shedding their booster stages with a metallic clatter into the sea. The small turbofan engines whine to life. The wings snap out. The missiles drop low, skimming just 50 feet above the whitecaps, invisible to long-range radar. They cross the coastline at 500 miles per hour. The missiles weave through the coastal valleys, banking hard to follow the terrain contours. The target complex comes into view, a fortified concrete bunker system and a massive fuel depot hidden in the hillside. The first missile acquires the command bunker. It dives. It slams directly into the reinforced concrete roof. The delay fuse triggers deep inside the structure. The entire hillside jumps. The roof lifts off and collapses inward. Concrete fractures and sprays outward like gravel. A plume of dust and pulverized rock shoots out of the tunnel entrance. The second and third missiles target the fuel storage tanks. They strike the metal cylinders simultaneously. The impact tears the thin steel walls apart like paper. The millions of gallons of fuel ignite instantly. A massive, rolling fireball mushrooms into the sky, turning the air orange and sucking the oxygen out of the valley. The heat wave ripples across the ground, scorching the vegetation black. Secondary explosions rip through the ammunition stockpile nearby. Artillery shells cook off in the intense heat, zipping erratically through the burning haze. The shockwaves flatten the perimeter fences. Back on the ship, the satellite feed updates. The red icons on the map blink out, replaced by static black craters. The Admiral watches the thermal bloom on the screen fade. The coastal threat is erased. 1,300 hours, outer defensive perimeter of the carrier strike group. The tropical sun beats down on the open ocean, reflecting off the water with a blinding white glare. The fleet holds a tight formation moving west at 20 knots. A dark smudge of smoke from the coastal strikes still stains the eastern horizon. On the U.S. carrier, the flight deck is a choreographed chaos of heat and noise. Catapult steam and arrestor cables slam against the deck as jets recover and launch in a relentless cycle. The surface search radar picks up a lone contact breaking from the jagged coastline. It is an enemy frigate trailing black smoke from previous damage. It ignores all radio hails. It accelerates to flank speed, charging directly toward the American fleet in a suicidal run. The enemy captain orders his remaining deck gun to fire. A shell splashes harmlessly into the water a mile short of the U.S. carrier, sending up a geyser of white spray. Target declared hostile. Clear the lane. The Air Warfare Commander orders. 2 U.S. attack aircraft patrolling overhead bank sharply to intercept. The lead pilot arms his weapons system. On his cockpit display, the infrared image of the charging frigate glows white against the cold ocean. He lines up the targeting pod. The laser designator paints an invisible point of light on the enemy ship's forward magazine. Rifle, the pilot says calmly. A 500-pound laser-guided bomb drops from the aircraft's wing pylon. The weapon falls silently, its guidance fins twitching rapidly to track the laser reflection. It glides through the air, closing the distance in seconds. The bomb strikes the frigate just forward of the bridge. It punches through the steel deck plating like a needle through fabric. There is a split second of delay. Then the warhead detonates deep inside the hull. The explosion is catastrophic. The blast force expands outward, blowing the steel plating off the ship's sides. The shockwave travels downward, hammering the structural keel, the spine of the ship. The massive steel beam snaps under the pressure. The ship's back breaks instantly. The bow and stern fold upward like a closing book. The bridge tower collapses into the widening crater in the deck. Fire erupts from the engine intakes. The broken vessel loses all forward momentum, plowing into the water and churning it into a violent froth. The two halves of the ship grind against each other with a screech of tearing metal before sliding rapidly beneath the waves. A massive cloud of steam hisses as the boilers submerged in cold seawater explode, sending a final plume of white vapor into the sky. 1500 hours, the debris field of the sunken enemy frigate. The ocean surface is a slick, undulating sheet of black oil and gray ash. The smell is overpowering, a thick chemical stench of diesel fuel mixed with the copper tang of blood and the salt of the sea. Debris litters the water for half a mile. Splintered crates, torn life jackets, and jagged pieces of hull insulation bob in the swell. The sun beats down on the grim scene, heating the oil slick until it shimmers with toxic rainbow colors. The side of the U.S. destroyer looms high above the water like a steel cliff. The crane winches scream as they lower 2 rigid-hull inflatable boats, RHIBs, toward the waves. The boats hit the water with a hard slap. The coxswains gun the outboard motors. The engines roar, churning the black oily water into brown sludge as the boats speed toward the center of the wreckage. "Keep your eyes open. Watch for swimmers," the bosun's mate yells over the engine noise. A hand breaks the surface near a floating piece of door frame. It flails weakly, coated in thick sludge. The RHIB cuts the throttle and drifts alongside. 2 U.S. sailors lean over the rubber gunnel. They grab the survivor's wrists. The oil makes the skin incredibly slippery. They dig their fingers into the fabric of his uniform and heave backward. They drag the enemy sailor over the side. He hits the deck of the small boat with a wet thud. He coughs violently, expelling seawater and oil from his lungs. His eyes are wide and white against his blackened face. He shivers uncontrollably. "Check him! Weapons clear!" the team leader shouts. A sailor pats down the soaked uniform, finding nothing but a flare pen. He tosses it aside. 50 yards away, another survivor screams. He is clinging to a yellow fuel drum. The water around him is clouded with red. The RHIB pivots and accelerates. The bow smashes through a floating wooden pallet. They pull alongside. This man is wounded badly. A jagged piece of metal protrudes from his thigh. "Medic! Get on this!" The corpsman scrambles forward, his boots sliding on the oil-slicked deck. He kneels beside the wounded man. He rips open a trauma kit. He takes a pair of shears and slices through the heavy wet fabric of the pant leg. The wound is deep. Arterial blood pulses out, mixing with the seawater in the bottom of the boat. The medic grabs a tourniquet. He slides it high up the leg and cranks the windlass. He twists it until the bleeding stops. The wounded man arches his back and screams in agony before slumping back against the rubber tube, unconscious from the shock. The boat fills up. 7 survivors, battered, burned, and exhausted. The waterline of the RHIB sits low. The coxswain pushes the throttle forward gently. The boat turns back toward the destroyer. On the horizon, the rest of the fleet maintains a defensive circle. But here, in the oil patch, the fighting is over. The U.S. sailors haul the survivors up the pilot ladder, hoisting them from the small boat to the steel deck above. Stretchers wait. The deck crew rushes the wounded to the medical bay. The black oil from the water stains the pristine gray deck of the warship, marking the path of the survivors. 1800 hours, open ocean, 20 miles west of the engagement zone. The sun bleeds into the western horizon, casting long, distorted shadows across the flight deck of the carrier. The sky transforms into a bruised purple, fading rapidly into black. The air cools, stripping away the oppressive humidity of the day's combat. The ocean swells are gentle now, rolling rhythmically against the steel hulls of the fleet. The smell of burning fuel has finally dissipated, replaced by the clean, cold scent of the open sea. The task force commander stands on the bridge wing. He raises his binoculars. The horizon is empty. The coastline is just a thin, dark line in the distance, silent and dark. Fleet, reform defensive screen, condition yellow, the radio crackles. The formation shifts. The destroyers slide back into their protective stations, flanking the high-value carrier. Their wake trails glow with bioluminescence in the darkening water. The Phalanx automated guns remain active, their radar domes spinning lazily, searching the sky for threats that are no longer there. On the flight deck, the yellow-shirted handlers push a damaged fighter jet toward the elevator. Sparks fly from a grinder as a mechanic smooths out a jagged hole in the fuselage. A hose team sprays down the forward catwalks, washing away the soot and salt accumulation. The water runs black into the scuppers and drains back into the sea. Inside the Combat Information Center, the threat board clears. The red hostile markers fade out. Intelligence reports confirm the enemy naval forces have withdrawn to the harbor. The coastal batteries are offline. The carrier's massive screws churn the water. The ship leans slightly as it adjusts course to the north. The navigation lights flicker on, red on port, green on starboard. The fleet becomes a collection of moving silhouettes against the stars. They push forward, cutting through the black water, leaving the battlefield behind in the dark.